Okay, if your organization is ISO 27001 certified, you're going to want to listen up because the rulebook for your security audit, it hasn't just been updated, it's been completely rewritten. Seriously, everything you thought you knew about getting ready for your next certification is about to change. And yeah, the clock is definitely ticking.
And really, this is the question on everyone's mind, right? Will this whole thing cost more and take longer? Well, for a whole lot of companies, especially those of you using a modern, flexible workforce, the answer is a pretty resounding yes. Let's break down exactly why that is.
So, here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about the change itself. Then, we'll dive into what I'm calling the new math of audits. And trust me, this is the big one. We'll also look at how all this affects remote work, the new standards for auditors themselves, and we'll wrap up with a solid action plan you can start using today. Okay, so what is actually changing here? Well, you know how your company follows the rules in ISO 27001? Think of this new standard, ISO 27006, as the rule book for the referees, for your auditors. It tells them exactly how they have to do their job. And that rule book just got a massive overhaul. Now, this isn't all happening tomorrow, but you can see the clock is ticking. We're in this transition period right now, but look at that date circled in red, March 31st, 2026. After that day, every single audit has to follow these new, tougher rules. No exceptions, no extensions. That's the hard deadline. All right, let's get into what is for most of you probably the biggest deal, the new math of audits. This is where the biggest financial and operational hit is going to be felt, because the way your audit time is calculated has been completely redefined. Okay, this right here is the absolute crucial point. It's this brand new, non-negotiable definition. You can forget about just counting full-time employees. The new metric is persons doing work under the organization's control. And pay very close attention to that quote from the standard, regardless of whether they are members of the organization or not. This is a total game changer. So let's make this real. Imagine your company has 50 full-time employees. Under the old rules, which were kind of vague, this was often the number you'd use to figure out the length and cost of your audit. Simple, predictable. But your company is agile, right? You're modern. You also work with, say, 250 external contractors and freelancers. In the past, since they weren't on the official payroll, auditors often had the wiggle room to just leave them out of the counts. Well, that wiggle room is now gone. Not anymore. Under these new rules, your official headcount for that audit is 300. Yeah, the foundation for your audit's time and cost has just ballooned by 6 times. Why? Because if they're doing work under your control, they are now in scope. Period. When you put it side by side like this, the difference is just wow. The headcount base has gone from ambiguous to crystal clear. The logic for having multiple sites, it's not about your real estate anymore. It's about your total number of people. And adding to your scope now comes with mandatory time penalties. All those old loopholes that made for cheaper, shorter audits, they're officially closed. Okay, so it's not all doom and gloom about rising costs. In this next section, we're going to see how the standard is finally catching up to how we all actually work, remotely and in hybrid setups. But as you'll see, this new flexibility comes with some new responsibilities. So the single biggest change here is that the old 30% cap on remote auditing is gone. Poof! This is a massive win for cloud-native companies and any remote-first organizations. In theory, if you've got the setup for it, your audit can now be done 100% remotely. But, and you knew there was a but, right? Here's the trade-off. With more flexibility comes a higher burden of proof. The new standard says your auditor has to formally write down the extent and effectiveness of the remote methods they used. It's not enough anymore to just say, oh, we did a video call. They have to prove that the evidence they gathered remotely was just as good as if they were sitting right there in your office. So the rules for how to audit are changing, and so are the rules for the auditors themselves. In this section, we'll see that it's not just your security system under the microscope anymore. The competence of the audit team itself is being looked at in a completely new way. Get this. This one is huge. That old rule that said an auditor had to have at least 4 years of general IT experience, it's been completely deleted. The industry has finally recognized that just because you've been around for a while doesn't mean you're competent, especially in the world of cybersecurity. So instead of just counting years, auditors now have to prove they have specific knowledge that's relevant to your business. This means they need to understand your industry's regulations like HIPAA and your specific tech stack, whether you're all in on the cloud or running serverless. Your certification body can't just send any old auditor anymore. They have to send one who actually gets your world.
All right, we've covered the what and the why. So let's get to the most important part, what you can actually do about it. Here are 3 concrete steps you need to take, like right now, to get ready for this new reality.
First, recalculate your scope. I mean it. Do an internal census of every single person doing work under your control. You need to know your new number before your auditor tells you what it is, so you can avoid any crazy budget surprises. Second, upgrade your audit infrastructure. To meet that new effectiveness requirement, you've got to make sure your logs, tickets, and policies are easy to get to online. And third, call your certification body now. Don't wait. Ask them how these new rules are going to affect your contract, your timing, and, of course, your costs.
At the end of the day, what's happened here is that the rules of security auditing have finally caught up to the way we all actually work now, in distributed, flexible, contract-heavy teams. The standards have adapted to this new reality. The only question left is, has your audit budget